Hey, we're Matrix and Futurebound, and we are currently in West London, and we're going to run you through our masterclass for computer music.
And we're going to show you how we put together one of our tracks called Let It Go.
So let's get to it. So yeah, there's many different ways that you can start tracks. Obviously, sometimes you attack it by just going straight to the drop and working on the beats and the bass. On this occasion, we started just around a 16-bar loop with just a simple massive patch, and getting some nice chords in place, and then building on layers until we were kind of happy about building it towards a drop, you know.
So yeah, this is the starting point of the track, which is basically a set of chords that we really liked. It's got a good vibe, and it sort of felt like it's got a nice hypnotic vibe about it, and almost like the sort of thing you would find in a like progressive house tune, say. And we're big fans of that kind of stuff, and a lot of those tracks, I think, they arrange them in a certain way where it's a nice long journey, and the high point of the track is pretty much the breakdown. So I think that was a general idea, like how can we just keep this simple chord loop kind of building and sounding interesting over.
I think the general vibe of the chords that we got in place, and obviously adding the delays and reverbs to kind of give it that atmospheric vibes, it was kind of leading us down that sort of path to kind of do a progressive building track.
Yeah, so I mean the basic chord part is made in massive, and it's a sort of classic kind of saw wave synth patch basically. And what we have done is do a bunch of automation on the filters and added a load of delay. We've got on there a waves delay, and we have got
delays and reverbs always play a big part in our overall sound.
Yeah, but it's so I think we'll play the first 16 bars of the track so you can see how it's put together. But we basically or 32 bars, I should say, we kind of wanted the synth to start nice and small, dry, and gradually kind of build, open up, and the reverb come in, and etc. And then a kind of switch when it drops, so that all kind of goes out and it goes very dry again. So that goes like this.
So the release of the stab is quite short here, you know, and as the sequence is rolling through, we gradually automate it so it's opening up.
So yeah, that's the opening 32, and so we've bounced that synth down to an audio file so that we can we bounce it down with a Waves filter plugin, low pass filter. And the reason we bounce it down rather than just leaving it live in the track is because what you'll find if you're putting a plugin like most low pass filters, if you leave it on, even though it's filtered right up here by 32 bars, if you leave that plugin activated, it can mess with the top end of your signal, like kind of mess with a very high frequency. So it's best to not leave a filter like that activated, even if you think you're not really using it, because the filter's all the way up. So for that reason, we bounced it down to an audio file. So just that opening 32 has got the filter plugin on it.
Let's go through some more of the layers that we've got going on.
Yeah,
so as this intro section is building up.
Yeah, so we've got in here we've got basically we've taken the chord progression, kind of dropped it down an octave, and I've got a patch here made on Silent, which is a synth that we use absolutely loads, and we use it because it sounds great, and it's a very quick and easy synth to create sounds with. So you know, that's always important, I think, because it's all well and good if you've got a plugin that's amazingly powerful, but if you're sort of constantly having to refer to the manual or sort of scratch your head trying to remember where a certain parameter is, it's kind of kills the vibe a bit. So
Silent's always great for like the melodic elements of the tracks that we use, you know.
Yeah.
Always seems to be that go-to synth when you need to get the right layers for your melodies and stuff.
Yeah, that's one of our top 3, I'd say. So we've got that fading in the background to thicken it up. And we have also got, so that's just a simple bass pad doing the notes, the chord progression to
just gives you that extra lift after the first 16 as a kind of a signal towards you know, edging towards a drop.
Yeah, so automating up in volume there. And then, oops, we've got another Silent patch here, which has got Decapitator on it, which is a really nice distortion plugin which you use quite a lot, and it's quite versatile because you can just do kind of subtle saturation with it, ranging up to kind of total annihilation of your signal. So that's one which features quite regularly for us. But that's this is what that one.
Just take the decapitator off, Joe, so we can have a listen to it without.
Yeah, so. So it's actually, what we're doing there is actually pretty subtle.
Yeah, it's very subtle, but
Yeah.
it just makes the sound a little bit more fuller, a little bit more bite on the top end.
And what else have we got in here? So we've got these couple of synth parts, both doing sort of more or less the same thing.
We're big fans of arpeggiators.
Yeah.
They seem to feature heavily in our tracks.
Yeah.
Definitely in the melodic ones, anyway.
And this is what is Retrolog, it's called. It's one of the synths which comes, Spectre, which comes with Cubase.
They're both Cubase synths, these ones, aren't they? Both of the ARPs.
Yeah. So I don't think that's a especially regular synth for us to use, but
No, it's not.
just
Yeah,
be one of those that we happen
but I
to
think
delve
obviously
into that
when we
day.
started this track, it was we were around some downtime in LA, in between shows, and we were just around the pool, just thinking. So obviously we were limited to the amount of synths that we were working on the laptop, so it was mainly Cubase only stuff, really.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. It's easy to sort of bypass the sort of stock plugins which will come with Cubase or whatever DAW you're using. I think a lot of people subconsciously think they're not very good, but a lot of them are actually quite decent.
Yeah, everyone goes for the tried and trusted third-party plugins and synths and stuff, but yeah, I mean, sometimes, as Jamie said, you just forget about you have actually got it all built in the door that you're using, you know.
Yeah. So that the part that is doing. And that's the other one. So they're quite low in the mix, but it's I guess that kind of thing is just a little bit of extra ear candy. You don't necessarily when you're listening to the track, you don't pick up on it specifically or focus on it, but it's just all part of
the atmospheric layers, isn't it?
And part of the whole idea of just taking one simple chord progression and how can we make it keep sounding interesting, keep moving and developing and changing. It's like adding quite subtle things in like that around it to make it feel bigger. So we've got all those layers of synth, and what we have done with them just as it goes into the drop, which I'll just play a few bars now. So it's all basically going to one group, and it's we've got a plugin on there, a plugin called Valhalla Shimmer, which is a really nice plugin actually that is basically a very, very big and long reverb. You can pretty much set it up to go on forever if you want to. But we've got all of that music going to that group, and we, if I can just find the track, if you bear with me.
So as Jamie's saying, every element of the intro there is going through to this one group, and the shimmer plugin delay and reverb is just kind of, it's kind of automating it to kind of sound like huge just before the drop.
Yeah, so just all kind of...
and at the very end, try again.
Yeah, just turns into a nice kind of wash of sound, and then on the drop goes straight back to dry. And with all the drum elements as well on the intro, that we bounce those down. So all this stuff, and we've done basically the same thing with that. I'll fast forward it here. So we've done the same thing with that, but the reason we've bounced that down rather than just putting that through with the rest of the music is what you'll find, like probably with most DAWs, but with Cubase certainly, you can't rely on your automation to be perfectly 100% bang on time. So when you've got really obvious elements that where it's very important that the timing is perfect, like drums or something that's very, very prominent, and you're doing automation on your plugins, you have to be careful, because if I'd automated those drums with that reverb going fully wet, and then I'm trying to bring it back dry right on the drop, and I just automate it right on the beat, it's basically gonna miss the first hit of the drums. So I don't want it to do that. So for that reason, all those drum parts have been bounced down to one file, and the reverb's been applied to that, and then when the drums actually come in,
You're getting the full punch of the drums in.
exactly, you're getting a nice super clean hit on the drums.
And you don't want the tail end of the reverb stuff going over
Exactly, yeah.
into the drop, because then that's going to take the initial power away of the drums.
Yeah, so that section there is the tail of the reverb over the drop, so we've got rid of that. So it's a big, big long reverb, but it stops dead on the drop. But yeah, Shimmer, that's a really nice plugin that we've only started using it recently, but it's really nice for that kind of thing.
Yeah, we used to use the PSP.
PSP used to be our favourite.
Yeah, that was like during our Universal Truth days. We were kind of, that was our go-to delay and stuff. And yeah, this is our new one.
Yeah, long reverbs and tape delays. We were quite big abusers of.
Absolutely.
So
yeah, going into the next section, obviously, all the main elements are working here. It's a case then of getting to the drop action, and I'm pulling out, finding the right beats to kind of sit right and complement the elements that we've got working in the track on the music side.
Should we talk about drums?
Yeah, I think when we do tracks as well, we're not always writing a track from scratch. You know, sometimes we're doing prep sessions where we're just writing beats, bass, patches or whatever, and that kind of helps with the workflow of when you have got a vibe like this going in the studio. You know, you've got a lot of different beats to kind of choose from, and because not every beat's going to kind of work, and sometimes it's a long process to get the right ones working together. So yeah, I think here we've got scrolling through our hard drives on beats that we've worked on before. I'm finding some key kicks, snares.
I've got down here. Well, yeah. Let's just get a quick blast of the drums on their own. So that's all the drums we've got going on, and this is the main snare is basically a whole bunch of layers of stuff. You got oops, whole bunch of layers layered together, and the key basically to layering up snares like that is a few things, but probably most important thing is where you're tuning them, so having them tuned to the fundamental tone of the snare is working together with your other snares
And the track.
and the track potentially, yeah, and that they're in phase as well is the other important thing, and the timing is right. They're your basic things, and I think our approach in a way to making snares is rather than maybe having a snare and thinking, oh, it needs some more bite, some more top end, or some more weight, or some more sustain, and trying to achieve that by processing it with an EQ or compressor or what have you. Often, rather than doing that, we'll try and find other samples we can bring in to sort of give it what it needs. So that's why, probably like a lot of people, you end up with lots of stuff layered together.
Yeah. There's always one key kick or snare that's kind of leading the way. But obviously, yeah, as James just said, then there's kind of finding some other layers just to add extra bite, extra transient on one of the others, or, you know, so just adding various elements to make that overall one sound correct.
And I think for you know, when you're layering your snares, you want to get them tuned. Obviously, you use your ears, but what makes it a lot easier is using some kind of analyzer. So basically, all our main snares that have got weight in them are tuned, so you can see there that's the fundamental note of your snare, which is around about 225 hertz or so, and the way you can do that, I mean, there's various ways you can do it, but you could put your snares in a sampler, would be one way, and tune them. And I mean, the way we do it generally is
We used to put our beats into the contact.
yeah, I mean, exactly. That's what we used to do.
So we were kind of grew up on writing our tracks in like EMU samplers and Akai samplers, and that was the way of doing beats, standard procedure. But then we found, not long after doing Universal Truth, the first album, was that they sounded a lot fatter just coming out in audio. So we stopped doing it that way.
So the way we would pitch a snare is in Cubase. If you go to the algorithm here, if you choose one that is Elastic Pro Tape, and then you get your time stretch tool, as you time stretch it, it's not actually time stretching, it's just playing it back at a different pitch. So some people use actual pitch shift algorithms, which I would never do on drums because it most likely is going to mess up your transients. So you either want to put them in a sampler or find a way to do it, which is just playing your sample back at a different pitch rather than pitch shifting. So yeah, basically you want to get, if you've got a snare that's then you've high passed all the bottom end out of it, you don't have to really worry about it necessarily. But if a snares where you've got that low end weight in it, you basically want to make sure they're all hitting at the same frequency. And the other thing you want to be doing is experiment with flipping the phase of them, because you're going to probably find that one way sounds really good and the other way cancels out all your low end against your other layers. So you definitely want to experiment with flipping the phase when you're layering your snares up. So yeah, basically I think your rules are get them in time, get them tuned the same, get them in phase. When we bounced all that down, that becomes that. So that's our sort of combination of 10 or so layers. And what we've done with that is, so that's just, this green one up there is just the dry sample. This one down here is the dry sample, but I've turned it up here by 6.5 dB, but then used the pencil tool to go in and draw a volume curve on it. And so effectively, I've turned down the transient of the snare, the front end, and then turned the whole thing back up. And what that does is boost the tail, so it sounds like a kind of more sustained snare. So it's like that's before and that's after. So it's got a bit, it basically boosts the tail, which you could do with an envelope shaper, or you could do with a compressor, but I quite like doing it that way because then it's very precise, exactly where you want it. It's the same every time, and yeah, it's just very reliable. So that's pretty much the snare. I mean, and then on top of that, we've just added a couple of additional little bits, basically claps.
Claps are just giving it the extra top end sort of life.
Yeah. And yeah.
And like there's no low end going on with any of that stuff.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So that is our snare. I mean, as you can sort of see, it's just a case of you add a load of ingredients, you potentially bounce it down, you add a load more, and then, you know, you bounce again and add and so on. It's like a continuous growth. And then this is our main kick, which this is like the M&F.
Yeah, yeah.
The
It's from
M&F
a track that we did called Magnetic Eyes about 5-6 years ago. That just always seems to. Actually, we used it on All I Know.
Yeah, it's had a longer lifespan than that. I think this has been on the go.
He's had a good shelf life, this one.
But I think a lot of people in drum and bass, you find that nice kick that works. I think a lot of people tend to stick to it. We don't always use it, but it's that kick is probably in.
It just always seems to work with the type of tracks that we make, you know. And
yeah, because I think what you want from a kick with drum and bass is you want it to have weight and punch and snap to it, but it's got to be not super low end that's going to mess with your bass. And this particular kick just seems to work really nicely with.
And again, this is a number of elements that are making this kick as well.
So let's play this whole lot of drums. So it's that kick and that snare with. It's actually, I'm just going to bypass what's on our master bus for now. So that's the snares we just talked about, and the kick, and plus a bunch of hi-hat ridey stuff. What have we got in here? We've got this. That's a contact kit, so using the hi-hats from that. So basically a bunch of hats like that. And I think on this particular, well, so they are going all to our drum group, but there's no processing on that. Just going straight to our drum group. We've got a good old-fashioned aim and break in there, high passed.
This is another element that always seems to feature in our tracks, just hidden away.
Yeah.
Always just adds that little kind of underlying energy and pace to the beats that we're doing.
It's quite low in the mix of the drums, but between that and this shaker, they just give it that little bit of shuffliness. And then we've got some ride layers. That's like an old, I don't know where we sampled it from, but an old live break. That is a nice ride, I think, from a sample pack made by our friends Pendulum from way back. And then low in the mix as well, just pretty much a bit of white noise, which has got a side chain on it, which kind of, it's not a thing you want to use too much of, but it can be nice just low in the mix. So that has got a little bit of this Fab Filter Saturn, which is quite a nice plug-in. It's like a saturation, distortion plug-in, and it can. So that's without, and that's with. So it's quite subtle, but it can be quite nice, this plug-in, when you play, if you're using it on drums, you play around with this dynamics control, because it can give you good kind of like pumping compression sound if you want that, or just more straightforward kind of saturation. But yeah, that we're fans of Fab Filter stuff. It sounds nice. So that loop then was bounced down to a drum loop, and then it's ended up in this track. But that, we actually made that before the track. I mean, normally we wouldn't really do it that way. I guess we'd do a track and we'd build the drums within it. But on this particular one, we kind of made that first, and then we were making this track, and we were like, oh, let's grab some drums, and we put that in the session.
Yeah, once we've bounced the drums down, when we've got those number of combinations working together, it's kind of get them in the session again now, and also try and find any other layers that we can kind of enhance the drums further. I'm a bit more of doing the same of what we were doing before, but yeah, a couple of more snares, claps, as well as some more percussion stuff, like some more hats. One thing that we're actually guilty of is actually using too many
that is true.
Of percussion.
That is true. We've actually, in this one, we've got like there's a track we did a few years ago called The Wall, and this is not something we would typically do at all, but we just got the whole drums out of that track. High pass there, and compressed like a fair bit, and then sort of used as almost like just a sparkly hi-hat top end layer, effectively, I guess.
I think sometimes when you're showing people how you're doing things like this, and you're like, well, why are you adding more and more stuff? But when you actually mute a few things out, it actually does make a difference, and it's actually adding to the flavour of what the drums are doing, you know?
Yeah. But yeah, so basically this processing-wise, there's not much going on. It's just combining the right elements together. And then it's all or mostly going to, where are we going to? A drums group, which has got another Fab Filter Saturn doing a little bit of compression, and also a Slate grey compressor, which we use quite a lot, and we also often use it with the mix somewhere, like, you know,
50%, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly, or somewhere around there, not all the way wet, because it's sort of, I think it just lets your transients of your drums remain a bit more intact. So you do a bit, you maybe have the compressor set to do a bit more compression, but then back off the mix. So you get the same effect, but you still get, you know,
the dry sort of how they are sounding naturally, and you're getting the 50% extra compression.
Yeah. So, that's without those two plugins, and that's with. So, you know, it's not like a wild drastic change, but it just kind of glues it all together a little bit, keeps it all under control.
One thing to do as well is that actually, you know, when you're getting your drums in place, is kind of keep on switching back and forth between mono and stereo, just see how different they are. If sounds are falling off, you know, and it's sounding dramatically different, well then you probably want to address that.
Yeah, I mean, that sometimes can be a battle, can't it? Because
yeah.
it's sort of...
Sometimes if it's all sounding nice and lively in stereo, you get it on a system and you'll get a short, sharp shock sometimes if you haven't got the drums right, you know, especially with drum and bass music.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly like your main kind of kick and snare need to be pretty mono. I think that's about it for the drums. I mean, there's this snare here, just providing a nice little top end snap. This sample has actually got a whole load of bass, which I would never really recommend sampling a snare that's got a full on bass line in it, but sort of got away with it on that occasion. And it's like a low in the mix thing, but it just gives the final bit of snap to our snare, basically. I think that probably covers how the drums are put together on this track.
Okay, so yeah, we've got the beats sounding exactly how we want now. They're working with all the other elements on the musical side. So obviously the next step for us is getting straight into the bass action. Always good to get something that's kind of got a full body mid-range to kind of give you, the right feel of if that's the right sound, One that we've got here is the robot bass, which is actually called robot bass.
I think we just call it.
Is that what we call it?
All right. I think that's, we'll play a bit of that.
Yeah,
solo.
yeah. This one's straight out of Serum.
So
it's got like a nice vowely feel about it.
Yeah, and so we've got kind of three sort of main layers of the bass, I guess. So that one, and then just a fairly like plain kind of saw wave tone. Again, that's from one of the stock Cubase synths, which is not one we've used loads, but it's kind of nice. And then sub coming out of Razor, which is just a nice sub, which really just does the job very nicely. So
there's like three elements of the bass which you can play in constantly together, all doing something different.
And those are going to our bass group, which has got another little bit of a fab filter, subtle warming up, and also being sent to another parallel group, which has got this plugin. A lot of Steinberg plugins in this song.
Yeah,
actually.
yeah. It's not like us. Yeah, on the parallel bass end here, there's kind of a bit more crunch.
So and let's show
which is being sent to over the dry signal.
That's without that parallel group, and that's with. So it's kind of giving it a bit more mid-range, make it sound a little bit more interesting. Also helping it, I guess, come across nicely on smaller speakers where you're not necessarily hearing the sub, because that's always a bit of a battle with bass, because you can make a bass that sounds really great when you've got full range speakers, and maybe if you're listening on like whatever, like a little speakers or a laptop, it can go missing. So you sort of need to keep an eye on it, because you obviously want your music to sound good in as many situations as possible.
I think with a lot of drum and bass tracks, there's a lot of bass switches going on as the track progresses and stuff. This one's kind of doing a similar sort of roll and sort of bass line. Not lots of edits everywhere.
I mean,
which we're also guilty of.
Yeah. We've got this element as well, which is just, it's got all the bottom end taken out of it. I think we actually played that. We played this sound earlier on, didn't we? So yeah, that's all kind of working together like that. And what else have we got? We've got this little squelchy sample which comes in later on, which is, I don't know, you found this sample, I'm not sure where it came from.
It's just one of our bass tones, just doing a bit of filter modulation and stuff.
So yeah, it's just a kind of little gnarly bass growl, which he'd sort of introduce at however many bars that is, 30, 16 after the drop, so that kind of fits into.
Yeah, we didn't want so much stuff going on and lots of different changes. This, as I say, this one's a more of a rolling style track. So there's not lots of big bass motifs at the end of the 16 bars or anything, it's just kind of subtle little things like this.
And see what we've also done, when that sample hits, we've dropped out this robot bass here just to make some space for it, so it's not fighting with each other. And that is also the part of the track, so that's 16 bars after the drop, which is where we bring in this melodic element. And that's made up of a few layers, and one of them here is like a little tiny stab of vocal played on a synth. And it's kind of nice to use certain things like that which don't come from a synth because they just sound a little bit more unusual, a little bit more characterful. So that's one of the layers. And that is another layer. So it's Spire, another synth we use quite a bit. And another silencer there. And should we talk about that little vocal sample that's in there?
Yeah, I think obviously when we got to this stage of the track, before we actually went to any sort of breakdown or whatever, we were kind of thinking, okay, we need to get some sort of human element, like some vocal going. And I was trying to get some little samples of that we'd used previously with vocalists that we'd used. And then Jamie came up with a good one, started singing Let It Go, didn't you?
Yeah.
So yeah, we got that. So that's Jamie actually singing that.
Well, we've we've got like these two things, which are basically. And let's find the right place to play them. Like, these here, which is just like the end of a word from a vocal track or something like from another track we've done, and it's just literally the last little syllable of a word. So we've got that and pitch shifted it and put some reverb and delay on it and just kind of used it as a, you know, additional texture over things. And again, it's that thing where you're not going to get a sound like that from a synth. It's just got an organicness to it, which is cool. And yeah, in addition to that, we've got this
and this one's playing from start to finish in the track.
yeah, it's actually running the whole way through the track,
Yeah.
isn't it? In sort of various
It's dropping down,
volumes
automating
and
down,
filtering.
coming up and building
And
up into different sections.
I basically made that by just singing really, really badly into a microphone, which is let it go, let it go, let it go, let it go. So, yeah, I just sung like the first thing that came into my head, and then put it into Vari audio in Cubase, which is awesome for editing vocals, and just basically just repitched it. Let it go. Hang on, let's not play the horrible dry one. Let it go, let it go, let it go. Pitch shift that one up there, and then let it go. That one down there. Let it go. And then, so we've then got it going to this group, which has got a filter automating. It's got this plug-in OTT, which is quite cool. It's like a multi-band compressor, which is quite nice for just
Yeah, we use that quite a lot, don't we?
Yeah.
It's actually a free plug-in as well.
Yeah, it's nice for just kind of bringing some excitement to a sound. And we've got this as well. Use this quite a lot. It's just a sort of a super quick plug-in to put on vocals and get a nice result very, very quickly when you just sort of don't really want to think too much. And so, yeah, CLA vocals, and then this pitch correction. It's not actually doing pitch correction, but we've used this here, the formant shifter. Just put that down a little bit just to add a bit more character, and then basically a load of reverb and delay. So then you basically go from let it go, let really it go, terribly let sung bit of vocal to a nice, cool additional texture for the tune. So yeah, and that is, as we said before, it's running all the way through the tune. Sometimes it's filtered down, so it just sort of becomes a like pad atmosphere thing, and sometimes it comes up more prominently at certain points in the track. So now we're kind of like getting to the point in the track where we want to go into a breakdown, and we want to kind of make it, I guess, we want to make it go very small and spacey for it to have room to build back up. So
it has a very Balearic vibe, this song. It's quite similar to like the Eric Briz remix that we did.
yeah,
And we were kind of thinking maybe nice to kind of go to a breakdown similar to that remix that we did. And just have, you know, some nice leads going. Kind of have it all spacey when you first break down, adding all the delays and reverbs.
yeah. So we've got a nice tape delay going on there where a lot of probably most of the musical elements are being sent to it. So I'll just turn it up loud so it's more obvious. But so you've got that just carrying across into the breakdown, and this automation curve here, that's the feedback of that delay. So you just keep it going to just give a nice kind of spacey atmosphere before the other elements come back in. And that's got, I think on that one, it's got an envelope shaper on it, like taking off some of the attack, just to make it a bit more of a soft sort of reverb wash. And this delay actually is probably, it's the one we use most of the time,
Yeah.
isn't it? Because it's got quite nice options just to put additional, easily put additional stuff on. Like it's nice to have a reverb on your delay, which obviously you can do as a separate plugin, but it's a nice, super quick way of doing it. So when you want a nice big atmospheric delay, it's right there and easy to do.
Sometimes nice to put an exciter as well on your delay channel as well, which can add an extra bit of like flavour and excitement to the whole thing. But yeah, so this section's actually kind of all going all kind of spacey for 16 bars, and then it was about introducing a lead line.
Yeah.
On the next section.
Yeah, and
Something
that's where we change the chords as well, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, something different that we hadn't done on the track, because for the most part of the track, it's doing the same sort of thing going round. And yeah, so we just thought it'd be nice to kind of switch the chords up a bit, play a different lead line.
So yeah,
Give it some classic M&F.
you got
sort of
nice
vibes.
tape delay going on, and then comes in with the lead here and the different chords. And it's just basically, I guess it's about finding that, changing the chord so that when it comes back in a second to the main chord pattern, that it just feels like a kind of nice lift-off moment, you know.
And here we introduce low end bass to really kind of bring out what the lead section's doing here.
This, we made that on Spire, that lead here.
There's a couple of different, I think we're using.
So it's bounced down, and we kind of reversed a couple of bits of it, like just to make it sound more interesting. So those bits down the bottom, we just reverse the audio file because it's just a bit more characterful. Ooh, computer's going crazy. Not sure what it's doing there. And all sort of through bits like this, these bits we talked about earlier on, like the let it go vocal, just moving up and down, constantly changing between the high octave and the low octave, and these vocal stabs as well. So they. And filtering down. So basically we're trying to keep everything moving and growing and just slightly changing in subtle ways as it goes along, so it sounds more interesting.
Do we have more sort of effect being sent to the leads here as well? And so when you go to the next section, it was more dry.
Yeah,
with the bass coming in.
Where are they going? So, yeah, I mean the bounce there is slightly different to
So this section's more of an introduction.
Yeah, it comes in with it's basically an additional layer at that point. So it's the same, playing the same riff and just slightly thickened up with an additional layer. We'll play into the drop now.
We've got the let it go vocal getting higher and higher as we go into the drop as well.
And we've also got, like how we discussed earlier on with doing this shimmer reverb, automating, going into the first drop, we've got the same thing going on but with some additional stuff, so it's a little bit more dramatic, because we've also got this phaser, Sound Toys Phase Mistress, which is a very nice phaser. So we've got that kind of automating the mix over the last 6 or 8 bars, gradually fading in, and this fab filter, a high pass filter. Let me just find the automation to it, which is down here. These ones here. So you'll see it comes out of bypass there, and as the filter goes up, the resonance also goes up. So it gets quite high resonance here. And then, so that's all the music stuff. It's not doing the drums because as we were saying earlier on, the drums are done as a separate audio bounce because of what we were saying about the tightness of automation timing. So the drums are dealt with separately, but they're basically doing the same thing, but just not running live through the plugin. Because also, something like that where where you put the filter cutoff and the resonance against that particular music, might not work so well with the drums because it's bringing out particular frequencies you don't want in your drums. So the drums have basically got the same thing going on, but where the cutoff is and what the resonance is will be slightly different to suit what is going on in the drums, if that makes sense. So yeah, just I guess on the subject of sub bass and sort of where to set it, that's probably like about the only thing that personally I find a spectrum analyzer quite useful for. Especially if you're not in the ideal perfect studio, or maybe your monitoring is not perfect, I just find it a good way for A, setting the level of your sub bass, and B, just keeping an eye on how even it is across the sort of frequency range. So what I tend to look for is just, particularly if you've got a track where it's like, you know, it's a very melodic one and it's got different chords and your bass is playing all over, you know, the spectrum. So you don't want massive deviations basically in your level. You don't want to have one chord where you're playing an F and the bass is at a certain level, and then you're playing an A and it's like 5-6 dBs quieter. So that's basically what I would use an analyzer for. And what you need to do, because different analyzers, some of them I find don't respond that well down, particularly at the very low end of the spectrum. So you need to, I couldn't off the top of my head tell you exactly what the settings are, but what I do is get a synth with a basic sine wave, and I will, you want to set your analyzer up. See, as you can see there, I'm playing different notes and it's showing me the same level, which might sound obvious, but a lot of spectrum analyzers at their default setting, when you're getting down into like 30 hertz and whatever, they start to go a bit funny. So you need to, well, you need to dig into it. I can't tell you right now what you need to change, but it's the sort of window settings and various things. But you want to make sure that your analyzer is responding that way. And if it is, then it's a good tool for checking that everything's okay. So as you can see, like, you don't have to be too obsessed with it, but you can see here where the bass is playing different notes, it's broadly staying at the same level, which is good. So if it was playing at wildly different levels, I would try and go and address it, whether by EQ or compression or editing your synth sound or seeing if something's out of phase or whatever is causing it, but you want to check it out. And then the other thing, so I mean, that's in terms of your keeping things nice and even, and in terms of your level of where to set it, you know, in addition to your good old-fashioned ears, what we do a lot is we get some reference tracks that you like, you think sound good, and you want to be at that level. Because I feel like there's a range of levels of where your bass is at, between like super heavy club music, maybe it's very minimal track and it's got really loud bass, between certain kind of music that's more perhaps aimed at sounding good on a radio, which can tend to be a lower range. But anyway, you pick where you want to be, find some reference tracks in that zone, and what we do is in Cubase, let me just find the right tracks.
We'll get a number of reference tracks which we know are tried and trusted big hitters, whether it's for dance floor, whether it works on radio. And it's always good to have them in your track, not to kind of copy what the mixdown's doing, but just to kind of see how far off yours is. And then, you know, if we're sounding way off, you can go back in then to the mix and start addressing things.
And yeah, that's sort of a really cool way of doing it in Cubase is, in our kind of template, we've got these 4 tracks here, ref 1, 2, 3 and 4, and the fader's all the way down on them, but you can use these Q sends to send them to each of your Q mixes, so 1, 2, 3 and 4. And then what that means is, if you use control room, which we do, which is a really good feature in Cubase, you can instantly compare what you're working on with up to 4 other tracks, and you can just let me just put our master chain back on. So for example here, or here, I've got an earlier version of the track, and I can switch to it there and back to our mix.
And that's without the tracks that we're referring to going through our master chain.
Exactly, they don't run through your master chain.
So we're just hearing it as we've bounced it from the session previous. And we can tell then, are we progressing here, or how far off?
And you can also, if that was another track you're trying to reference, when you bring it up here, you can look at where is, where the sub bass level is on your analyzer, like with your favourite track you're trying to go up against, and then you can compare what you're doing with a reference track. And for me, that's one of the ways I try and set the level of sub bass. And also another thing, actually, just on that similar subject, I find if you are comparing your A/B against things, it's quite important to try and get them volume matched, because if you're comparing it against something which is much louder, then it's not a good comparison to make. So what I find is a useful thing to do is in Cubase, which I'm sure you can do it in all the software out there really, but if I've got an audio file here, I would measure the loudness of it, your integrated loudness there, which is -5.2, and I would try and make sure, I would want to be comparing two tracks at the same kind of loudness. Or you might even just measure the loudness of the particular section, like the drop section, say, and make sure they're the same. But certainly if you're comparing two versions of a track you've been working on, so I've got two versions here, up the top and that one, and they're at slightly different volumes, so I'll measure the volume and then compensate. See up here, this version's louder, so I'll turn it back down, and then I can make a better judgment as to which one is better without one of them sounding a lot louder and kind of fooling me, which is especially important nowadays when, it depends what you're aiming your music for, but if you're only concerned with it being played in a club, you probably just want it nice and loud. But if you've got your music on streaming platforms like Spotify and Apple Music and so on, where the volume of them gets normalized, then you basically don't want to be that bothered about being super loud anymore, which is quite cool from I think a producing music point of view, because you don't have to smash the hell out of your music with a limiter. So we mix our tracks a little bit quieter than we used to. For that
I think right through the industry now, I think that's the kind of the loud war is definitely not so much of a thing now, is it?
Like
Which
it's
is good.
It's not over, but it's
It's not over, yeah. But it's it's definitely a good thing, because we want to listen back to our music in the future, and listen to it nice without it sound like thrash metal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So on the mastering output here, there's not a lot going on here. Just a little bit more compression using the Slate compressor, and Ozone 7.
Yeah. So again, Slate Grey is it's definitely our most commonly used compressor, I think, and kind of as we touched on talking about the drums, it's on a 50-50 mix. I'll play it here so you can see. So it's sort of doing like kind of 3 dBs or so of gain reduction. Hang on, I'm playing the wrong version of the track. Yeah, there we go. So that's kind of typically what we would usually have. A Slate Grey doing that, kind of like 3 dBs or so. And our go-to limiter is pretty much always Ozone. Like occasionally we use 2 limiters, like one hitting before this one with a decent amount of release, but our final one is we always just have it set to 0 release, and sometimes we use a bit of that transient, whatever it's called, transient emphasis, but in this case we're not using it. It's when you have the limiter set up like that with 0 release, it's very, very close to just basically clipping your signal, but that's how we use it. And often we have a bit of widening like that, so that's sometimes we have more stuff on our master bus, but that's our standard stuff, but we don't tend to have loads on there.
Okay guys, that's all we got time for today. Hope you've enjoyed our masterclass, which covered one of our new tracks, Let It Go, which is taken from our new album, Mystery Machine.
Hopefully you found it interesting to hear how we put together our tracks, how we put together our drums, and how we arrange it to get the most out of a simple idea, which is what this track's about. But I hope you enjoyed watching.
And if you want to follow us on any of our social media pages, look over to Instagram, matrixandfuturebound.com.